Okay, we're ready.
We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, June 23rd. Welcome to the Transportation and Environment Committee. We have two items on our agenda today. The first is a petition for abandonment of two portions of Washington Grove Lane in Gaithersburg. The applicants are the Housing Opportunities Commission and the Emery Grove United Methodist Church, which are jointly pursuing an abandonment in support of the proposed Heritage Emery Grove redevelopment, which includes affordable housing and community revitalization efforts to honor the area's Black heritage. Very exciting stuff. Mr. Kenny, I'll turn it over to you for more.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, this is the applicants for this project, the Housing Opportunities in Emery Grove United Methodist Church are pursuing this abandonment of county right-of-way for their joint Heritage Emery Grove development in the area. Today, this resolution references two abandonment areas. The first, approximately 41,997 square feet on the south side of Washington Grove Lane, and about 2,946 square feet on the north side. That 41,000 figure for abandonment area one is not what is present in the resolution transmitted by the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. That resolution references a figure of 56,826 square feet. Since that transmittal and since introduction before the council, we have received an updated measurement of this area from the applicant. That measurement was circulated between the applicant and County DOT, who owns the land. All parties have agreed that this is more accurate. So in council staff's recommendation for action today is a recommendation to change that number in the resolution to go before the full council. This abandonment area, these two areas along the Washington Grove Lane, as of now, they are not currently roadway today, but were dedicated in order to potentially do a future widening of Washington Grove Lane for a potential relocation of State Route 124. These plans were never realized, and in their testimony in this case, both MCDOT and the Planning Department have testified that these established rights of way are not needed for current or foreseeable public use, meeting the statutory threshold for abandonment. MCDOT did recommend approval of this abandonment subject to several conditions. These three conditions will look familiar, as they are very common in abandonment cases such as this. Those being that public utility easements be preserved for PEPCO, WSSC, and other relevant utility companies, that access and connectivity be maintained through the future redevelopment for right-of-way access, or not public right-of-way, but access, and that certain title issues for these areas be resolved through the subdivision process. There was not sufficient documentation in the initial DOT review of this area to establish county ownership. This is something that we run into often with plots of land that were dedicated a long time ago. But this process, or the formal establishment of county jurisdiction over these areas can be established through the re-subdivision platting process. And that stipulation is included in the draft resolution. Happy to answer any questions. We also have a representative from DOT here. But other than that, council staff suggests the committee recommend amending the resolution to change the square footage of abandonment area number one from 56,826 square feet to 41,997 square feet, but otherwise recommend supporting the resolution.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kenny. So just to summarize what you said, two pieces of land were were held by the county from 1969 and 1971 for the assumption or planned purpose of widening the road. And that proposal is being taken off the table in exchange for this affordable housing project, correct?
Correct. The planned transportation capacity that was needed has been relocated to adjacent roads. So planning and DOT no longer feel that this widening would be needed for present or foreseeable public use.
Very good. Thank you.
Right?
A single question. So
Sounds awesome. If you need somebody to move the amendment, I will move it. Or-
without objection,
Yeah.
we'll unanimously support that.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Now on to an item that might take a little bit more time. We are now going to discuss and make recommendations regarding amendments to the comprehensive water supply and sewage systems plan, including 2 category change requests. These 2 properties are located across the street from each other on Ridge Drive in the Glen Hills area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lovchenko to provide more details.
Yes, and I do have some slides to get us through this very quickly. We only have 2 requests, as you mentioned, so I think we can go through them fairly quickly.
And Mr. Sukup is joining us online up. I see him there. He is. Okay.
Yes, we have Mr. Sukup, who's been the longtime DEP go-to person on the water and sewer plan. He's joining us from home today. Okay, let's see. All right, just to summarize quickly where we are today. These recommendations were transmitted by the executive on March 19th. Both requests are for public sewer to serve proposed single-family homes. Both properties are currently unimproved. As Chair Glass mentioned, they're in the Glen Hills area within the Potomac Subregion Master Plan area. This map shows that the Glen Hills study area that was part of a large septic/sewer study about 8 years ago. And it's the Glen Hills area is located basically southwest of the city of Rockville. It actually has a Rockville zip code, but is not most of it, if not, I think there might be a small fraction of it is in the city, but most of it is not in the city of Rockville.
I was going to try and clarify that, but
Yeah.
no, it's in a middle ground. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in the Potomac subregion area, but it's fairly north in that area. The planning board discussed these requests on May 1st. We'll get into their recommendations when we get into the requests. And the council held a public hearing on May 7th. There's a bit of a delay, and that's because it came during the budget process, so we were not able to move it as quickly as we normally do with these. And just quickly, the responsibilities here. DEP is responsible for receiving applications from property owners, processing the requests. They coordinate with various agencies and departments, including the planning department, WSSC Water, permitting services, and any other departments and agencies needed on this. Requests that are fairly straightforward and recommended for approval based on current policies can go through an administrative process. And we see those, but the council does not have to act on those. Those can go through a process through the executive branch. We inform the council of those. And if there are issues, we talk about them, but only the items that are in the process for council action are what come over to the council. And generally, those are ones where there is some complication. It could be a denial, because denials cannot be done administratively. Or it could be a recommendation for approval, but there are some conditions or other issues that the department, the DEP or other departments or agencies feel require some discussion. The water and sewer plan itself is ultimately approved by the Maryland Department of the Environment. Any amendments to it are approved by MDE. Category changes are basically amendments to the plan. You could also have text amendments or policy amendments to the plan, which we talk about more often during the comprehensive update. We do expect a comprehensive update to be coming back to the council this fall. It was a few years ago when the council took up the prior update, and there is a 3-year state requirement that that counties take these issues up comprehensively. So we do expect to see a broader discussion of the 10-year plan this fall. In terms of the individual requests, I mentioned they're both basically next to each other in the Glen Hills area. This map is showing the 24 TRV 04A, the Bag Harry request. And it's outlined in or highlighted in the yellow on the screen. It's about just short of a 1 acre RE1 zoned property located on Ridge Drive. The property is outside the planned sewer service envelope, but does abut the sewer service envelope from its east side of the property, and so is eligible for consideration under the peripheral sewer service policy. And just to refresh with regard to Glen Hills, the properties in Glen Hills tend to be 1 or 2 acre lots. They're not generally recommended for service. There are several exceptional policies that can come into play in Glen Hills as in other areas. For instance, if it's a property with existing septic, but the septic system fails and DPS does not identify a feasible on-site solution, then the property could seek public sewer service that way. If a main abuts the property, then the property is often eligible for a single connection to that. And then in this area, the peripheral sewer service policy is something that the Potomac Subregion Master Plan includes. This dates back to 2002, where properties that abut or confront the planned sewer envelope also have an opportunity to be considered for service. So in this case, the Bag Harry property does, and so it does have eligibility under the plan. So what is this peripheral sewer service policy? Well, in the Glen Hills area, as I mentioned, it can be considered on a case-by-case basis. There are 2 conditions that we'll talk about a little bit affecting how the area how the property could be served. The policy language includes discussion that any sewer extensions should follow existing public rights of way and must not have significant environmental impacts. And also, the selection of sewer, where possible, should minimize the number of properties that would be newly abutting to the main extension. So you have those 2 policies. In this case, the Bag Harry request, there are two ways that WSSC Water has identified that the property could be served. One is from an existing low pressure main on Valley Drive, which is the area behind the property, which is actually in the planned sewer service area. It's actually fairly close by. So it's a fairly short extension, a 50-foot extension, but it would require an easement across the property to the back. So that's not something we typically do within the peripheral sewer policy. That's something that is, we avoid easements on these properties. There is another way to serve the property, however, and this is from an existing main further away. This is to the south of the property, and this map here shows if you go south to basically the Watts Branch Drive and Circle Drive intersection along Ridge Drive, there's an existing main there, and you need a significantly longer extension, but it could follow the public rights of way. And it would abut a number of other properties, and I've identified those. 12 additional properties would be abutted. However, they fall into several different categories, which I've got here. First, a couple of properties are already within the planned sewer service envelope, and they're already served, so they're not impacted by this additional main abutting their property. There's also a couple of properties that were approved for sewer but have not yet been served. Those properties are noted on those arrows. So they would potentially benefit from this extension occurring, since this would abut their properties and make it more feasible for them to connect. Also, there's 3 properties just south of the Bagh-Harry property that, similar to the Bagh-Harry property, abut the planned sewer service envelope. So presumably they could apply just as Mr. Bagh-Harry did to get service, and they would also benefit if this extension were to connect to the Bagh-Harry property, because once again, they would abut them. And then there are 5 properties, they're on the other side of Ridge Drive, basically, that are not in the planned sewer service envelope and not otherwise eligible under the peripheral sewer service policy, but which would abut if this extension were to be done. So those are the 12 properties. Now, the county executive and the planning board, their recommendation is to approve the request for sewer, but condition it on WSSC Water approval of this longer sewer extension. And the executive staff report notes the concern about the utilization of easements to serve properties, but also in this case, this longer extension has some history to it. It was identified in the Glen Hills Study Area Plan from a number of years ago as a potential way to serve this area. And in fact, as I mentioned, there's several properties here that would benefit from it, some of which have already been approved for sewer. So from that standpoint, it makes sense both from observing the policy of avoiding easements, but also in considering the shorter and longer term likelihood that we're going to need a sewer extension along that area anyway. So as I mentioned, the county executive and planning board supported that, and council staff also is supportive of that extension, given those potential benefits beyond just the Bagh-Harry requests that we would see from this. And we do have DEP staff here and planning board staff here to answer questions. And also just note, as we will get into, as I'll sort of note that for the second request, which is right next door, the same extension would benefit that request. So a lot of the discussion we're having on the first request will ultimately apply to the second request. But in their case, they don't have a peripheral sewer service eligibility. So that request could only be approved under our policies if this extension were to occur. But let's get through this request first, and then we can talk about that one.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Volchenko. Welcome, DEP. I don't know if any of you have any additional comments you want to add. No. So I just have one question. Given that this area has been talking about this for a very long time, I've engaged with neighbors long before I arrived at the council about this. And as Mr. Lovchenko noted, this is an evolution from where the position was. Can you talk a little bit more about that evolution in thinking?
Oh, sure. The 2002 plan greatly limited sewer connections in the Glen Hills area, except for basically a failing system. It didn't even allow for abutting connections or the peripheral sewer policy either in the Glen Hills area, pending further study. So it asked for further study. That additional study happened, as I mentioned, about 8 years ago. The council ultimately supported the idea of treating these properties similar to other 1 and 2 acre lots elsewhere in the county that are sort of in this situation. And it also allowed the peripheral sewer policy to apply in this area too. What it stopped short of doing with regard to the plan was making any sweeping changes in categories for this property. And that's because it felt that would be more appropriate to do as part of a master plan amendment, if that's where the council wanted to go. And there was some discussion after that of moving forward with a limited amendment to the Potomac master plan. And it was discussed a couple of times in the planning board's work plan, but ultimately was not moved forward in the work plan. So we do not have an updated limited master plan amendment for Potomac. We're still working off the 2002 plan.
Appreciate that. And I think what this proposal signifies, in addition to the other work that we as this committee has done over the last 2.5 years, is continuing to update the plan, recognizing that there is a need for more housing, different types of housing, and understanding, of course, that there are limitations within WSSC and some of the parameters therein, but taking a different look and a different approach, and appreciate DEP recognizing that, and clearly the planning department as well. Comments? Yeah, Councilmember Malcolm.
It's hard to talk about this one without talking about the next one. So I'll save the comment, but I think that if, for instance, the extension goes along Ridge Road, it would be difficult to not approve the next one. But the question I have for now is, who pays for the extension?
Well, the extension itself, the costs associated with the extension are the responsibility of the applicant or applicants. There's one exception to that, which is a front foot benefit charge is assessed by WSSC Water to properties that connect to these systems. And WSSC Water does estimate what the collection, what those amounts will be over, I believe it's 20 years. Based on the number of properties that would have the ability to connect. And they reduce that from the charge to the applicant for the extension. If they were to work through, and actually I should back up, there's two ways that an applicant can go through this process. There's the WSSC Water built system, where WSSC Water manages the design and construction. And then there's the private connection approach, which the applicant can work directly with their own contractors. They still have to go through WSSC Water for the approvals, but then they would work directly with a contractor to design and build the system. But if they go through the WSSC built system, the front foot benefit charge revenue that is estimated would be deducted from the amount they would have to pay WSSC Water for the extension. But the bigger issue with an extension like this, and as I noted, it's a 1,600-foot extension. These are very expensive. The numbers that DEP has noted range from about $700 to $900 a linear foot. Very expensive, and that's why some properties are approved and they don't connect for a while, because it's not affordable unless they bring in other people with them. Perhaps we do have some circumstances in the county where folks group together to make this work, and this is one of those opportunities where that could happen, where you do have several properties that may see a benefit to moving forward sooner rather than later on this. And then they could be an applicant, a joint applicant, and they would then work out those financial arrangements among themselves. But from the county's perspective, the county is not a party to that. The county has an approval process for working with WSSC to identify and approve the mains that are extended, but the cost aspects of it are the applicant's responsibility in working with WSSC.
And the option of taking it through the neighbor's yard with an easement, that's a much smaller area,
It's
right?
much shorter. Now, of course, they would have to work out with the neighbor the easement. There's no requirement that the neighbor agree to that. So that can be an issue. But the other issue here is that we have other properties, several others that are approved for service that would benefit from this main, and the peripheral sewer policy envisions staying in the public right of way. And as I noted also, it was identified in the Glen Hill study as a potential sewer extension alignment that would help with the broader approach to Glen Hills down the line.
So if WSSC has it in their plan to potentially extend the main here, then WSSC would be paying the full amount.
Well, in this case, the area is already developed. If it was undeveloped, the applicants that are building, if you're talking about like a large residential development, that applicant would be building the system themselves, working with WSSC. WSSC does not, except in unusual circumstances, they're not building new mains to serve private properties.
Okay.
That is a responsibility of the applicant. In the cases where WSC is building infrastructure to support new development, then it would use its system development charge revenue to do that. And that does happen in some cases where projects may have a mix of serving existing development, but also providing capacity for new development. WSC will pay for that, but they're paying for it out of a different bucket, not their general revenues, but from their system development fund revenue. So a growth pays for growth aspect. And these properties would be contributing to the system development charge because they are newly connecting to the system. So they're paying into the system development charge,
Okay.
system development fund.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Not seeing any more questions. I'm comfortable approving the staff recommendation and executive recommendation on S3. Now that is conditioned on WSSC approval of the extension, correct?
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm sorry. The proposal S3 is conditioned upon WSSC approving the
Yes, WSSC, it's been conceptually reviewed as a main extension, but they have to confirm through a hydraulic analysis that it can actually work. If for some reason they find that it would not, we will bring this issue back to the council and we can talk about whether the alternative extension approach for the Bag Area property should be considered.
Okay.
But right now we have this extension concept that seems to meet a number of policy criteria. And so we feel that's what should be advanced to WSSC's review.
Very good. I recall one of the more recent instances when we took this up, there was a request and WSSC had expressed concern about water pressure in the general area. And so,
Right.
so understand the conditional approval.
Yep.
Without
Okay.
objection,
Mhm.
great, we'll support the request.
All
And
right.
that takes us to the second often referred to request,
This is 25
inextricably tied.
25 TRV 02A, the Lou property. This is also a 1 acre property. It's across Ridge Road from the Bag Harry property. So a lot of the broader Glen Hills issues apply to this one. Unlike Bag Harry, because they do not directly abut or confront the planned sewer envelope, this property doesn't have that option for a policy that would allow for consideration. So just on that basis, the executive, planning board, and council staff recommend denial of the request. However, we do know that if this extension were to move forward, the alignment would abut the Lou request, and then they could apply under the abutting mains policy, another policy within the water and sewer plan. So this one could be back if and when this extension were to happen.
Mr. Olchenko, you mentioned, I think in response to Councilmember Balcom's question, that that oftentimes or sometimes applicants put in requests as a community to offset costs or to build upon each other. Was that done in this case?
No,
I'm not looking at the dates, so.
The Bag Harry request is by itself. There were a couple other approvals. One was a public health case. I'm not sure what year it was approved. 2001. So a good example. At that time, sewer was quite far away. It's probably worked its way a little bit closer. This would get it all the way basically to that public health case from 2001.
This application's been pending
No,
since
no, not the
2001.
Bag-
Oh, okay. No, the second one.
No, not this one.
Oh, okay.
No, one of the properties that would abut the new main, if it were to be extended, was previously approved.
Understood.
But once again, because of the financial aspects of this, has not been able to connect to. So what they've likely had to do is more frequent pumping out of their septic system, and maybe some limitations on the use on their property to try to get by before until sewer becomes feasible.
And from a process question, predicating a preliminary approval upon a preliminary approval, talk to me through that logic.
Yeah, I think the abutting main policy requires that the main actually be there, not that we have approved a request that assumes a main along that route. So that would be a couple extra permutations that we have not gone haven't gone down that road before.
And when was this application? When did this come in?
Both of these applications are in the most recent batch. They could be, it could be within the last year. I don't know when they first came.
Yeah, the Lou property was applied for in, I believe it was March of this year, 2025, and then Big Gary about a year ago.
So fairly recent, considering we were just referencing 2001, right?
And,
Totally different case. I get it.
And I will say, just historically, many years ago, we used to get 5, 10, 15 requests. Now we're getting onesies and twosies, and that's partly because of the financial aspects of this. It's very expensive for many of these properties to connect unless there happens to be a main near. So that's why we don't get as many as we used to. DEP still does 2 of these types of packages a year, in the spring and then in the fall or winter. So depending on when they apply, they get into that next package when they're ready. So that year is a little long, but not unexpected if they hit the cycle at a certain time.
Mhm. I think this is an interesting one. Curious to hear what colleagues think. Councilman Malcolm.
Thank you. So the point about who's responsible for paying, pay for the extension. So the homeowner, but then you said that there's a abutting or a fronting.
Was a front foot benefit charge.
Front foot benefit charge. So the question would be, are the homes or the property on the other side of Ridge Drive, would they be responsible for pay once this main goes in, if it goes in, would the people on the other side of Ridge Road be charged that a fronting fee?
They're currently not charged until they connect.
Okay.
So, but WSSC Water makes assumptions about, okay, if we have 12 properties, they make assumptions about how long they might be before they connect and how much revenue might be generated. Now, I will say that the revenue from the front foot benefit charge is a pretty small amount compared to the cost of the extension.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed much in many years based on the frontage, and they pay it and it's paid off the property tax bill.
I guess the question would be that in that calculus that WSSC would make, would they take into consideration the Lou property as a potential connector?
Oh, yes, I'm sure they would.
So
They would factor that in now, but they wouldn't charge them until they connect.
yeah, I get it, but they're also making the assumption that they would be eligible to connect. So I recognize that the rule is that the abutting main has to be there before that you can use the abutting main argument. But it seems, if I was the first one, the Big Gary, and put in this water main, and then we've denied Lou, as opposed to just saying, if both of these people want this connection, and it's a conditional conditional approval for Big Gary, why can't it be a conditional approval for Lou?
Well, I mean, it's certainly something that the council could consider. Once again, as I mentioned at the beginning, MDE would have final say on whether they feel that that's consistent with our own plan, as well as their own assumptions for how these plans should move forward. I do see that Mr. Sukup has his hand raised, so I'd like him to get a chance to weigh in as well.
Make one clarification to Keith's comments.
But Mr.
the
Sukup,
act-
hold on, we'll
barely
need to
hear
raise your audio in here.
Oh, okay.
You want to try it again?
Okay. Can everybody hear me now? I hope.
Yep, barely. Yep,
Okay.
keep going.
Okay. Just a clarification on Keith's comments. For a property like the Lou property, to become eligible under the abutting mains policy, the main does not have to be there existing. It has to be approved by WSSC for design and construction. We modified that several years ago so that property owners who could potentially link up with an abutting main could do so and contribute to the cost of the extension. So
Thank you.
the main does not have to be there for the Lou property to qualify under abutting mains. It would be part of this process of getting WSSC to approve the design and construction of the main. Thank you.
Thank you. So why didn't you approve it as a conditional approval similar to Bagheri? What's the rationale for giving one a conditional approval and then the other one rejection if the same water main would go through?
I can jump in on this one, Keith.
Yeah.
The reason that we recommended denial for the Lou property was that we don't have a proposed sewer main that would run along Ridge Drive. And therefore, the property would not qualify under abutting mains. And there are no other sewer policies in the Glen Hills area that would justify granting an approval. Is it possible to, say, do some kind of conditional approval on Lou that connects with the Bagheri property? I suppose it's perhaps stretching the abutting mains policy a bit, but that's why they come to the council.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's
That's-
Yeah, so my feeling on this is what we just approved was approval of the sewer main extension along a public right of way, which is the Ridge Drive, right? So I just don't see the distinction between the two, because we're saying that so if, for instance, WSSC does not ever build abutting the Ridge Drive main, does Bagheri need to come back in for approval of going across his neighbor's yard with the easement?
Yeah, well, right now, the way the executive recommendation is that it is conditionally approved on this other extension approach, the Ridge Drive extension. But yes, if that condition were found to was not going to happen, then the applicant could come back and say, let's go with the other option.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time seeing the distinction between the two.
Now, the Lou property doesn't have an alternative. This is the only way that it could be served. So yes, if you were supportive of Lou, it would most definitely have to be a conditional approval.
Yes.
Since we don't have any other policy other than the abutting mains policy. So we would have to condition it on a future abutting main, basically.
And if we did approve the conditional approval on the Ridge Drive main, would the two property owners split the cost?
Well, once again, that becomes a private transaction between those two properties and perhaps others. Certainly it would be to their benefit. It would also be to their benefit if the folks closer to where the main is also participated. I mentioned there was the public health case that is never connected. There's another property that's approved. There's the three others just south of Bagheri that are in the same situation that the Bagheri property is, that they are theoretically eligible under the peripheral sewer policy. They just haven't asked yet. Maybe they're perfectly happy with their septic systems, but it would be up to them to decide whether to participate. And it's one of the challenges here, and we've talked about this in the 10-year plan. This is the kind of situation where it'd be great to have some kind of development district where folks opt in and you have a set boundary, and then the costs are shared with folks within that district. But right now, that is something that would have to be initiated on the private side. We don't have a public mechanism right now to do something like that in this area.
Councilmember
Sorry,
Stewart.
thanks. I mean, I agree with Councilmember Malcolm. I think that doing this as a conditional approval makes sense if we're doing the Big Area as the conditional approval. I don't see why we would make the Lou applicant reapply, just make it conditional. I'm not sure there's any other reason not to provide them if this is this built in the right of way, then I would, if they came back, I would see that we would have no reason to necessarily not approve their application. So for me, it makes sense to do it as conditional.
It could even, I mean, if the main were to be built, they could likely be approved administratively in the future too.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even have to come
We
back.
wouldn't have to come back to us, which is even better.
So that's the way it would occur now, though. They wouldn't have to be approved now for you. They could go through the administrative process later if the main were to cross in front of their property. But I see your point that the issues are similar for the two properties. They would be served by the same main. Why not dispose of it now? I see that argument. We can try to put that together as part of the committee recommendation and see what the council does, and then ultimately it will have to go to MDE to see what they do.
Yeah.
So I agree with my colleagues and recognize that when we have taken this committee, unlike the previous committee from the previous council, this committee, when we have taken a more expansive view, MDE has actually pushed back a number of times. And so some of the disgruntled and disappointed residents have reached out to me and I said, hey, we supported, we understood, but you need to talk to MDE. And I appreciate, again, the question about the cost, because what I actually think is probably the most salient argument here is the more applicants we can line up logically and to the fidelity of the law, the more economical it makes in the planning process for that sewer to be installed, right? They know how many applicants there would be, how much it would cost, and how to divide up those costs. If it's done in an ad hoc basis over a longer period of time, it is much more difficult to make it financially viable. And then you just elongate that time period as well. So great. So it sounds like we're all in support of the conditioned condition. Yes.
It's Jamie Pratt from the planning department. And I guess I have just a few concerns about the second case, just because the only reason it would ever be qualified is under a condition that has to be met by the first applicant. So if you gave the second applicant, what would the condition be? And then there could be other properties in the past that have been approved under the peripheral sewer policy that have not been built. And then that would open up other properties, what if somebody closer to where the main would go says, well, because that one down the road qualified, I now qualify, even though the main doesn't exist yet. So I'll build the main to my house. And the person that made it possible to make the abutting main policy apply in the first place still doesn't have sewer. So I'm a little bit worried about the unintended consequences of.
So I do agree that there is a what if factor here. But the way I actually view this is it could be very possible for all of the properties along Ridge or around there to actually submit applications that are all qualified, but they still have to meet all the other factors. Wouldn't that mitigate any concern?
I want, to understand what the condition is for the Lou property. Is it they're just conditionally approved, or what is the condition that the abutting main be planned all the way to the Big Area property? Is that the condition for the Lou?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. so the condition, because right now, the Bagheri condition would be that the main is extended to their property. Given that it's right across the street, I don't see
So it's
that
the trigger.
it could be the same thing, that the condition that the main extension goes to their house. And then I get what you mean about the first, the first house. And that's a question that we would have to talk about. Okay, so the public health one that came, that was approved, but it never happened because of the money. So it's possible that if another, I don't know how far this goes, like where the first house would be. I think I see it here. We have to come up with that, and I guess I would rely on, attorneys to make that distinction.
I'm not sure.
If I could follow up.
Yeah.
I think the chicken or the egg proposition that you're raising is if it's conditioned on the abutting main policy, but the main hasn't been built, right? That's it. So the Bagheri might be approved, but until it's actually in the ground and abutting, then it can't trigger lieu.
Correct.
Right. And so we're trying to put them on a parallel track, recognizing that Bagheri is absolutely going to create the abutting main, but because it hasn't been built yet, it doesn't qualify for that justification. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I would almost want you to condition it on the Bagheri connection. The would be conditioned on the
Well,
WSC designing or whatever to
So-
reach Bagheri.
So I understand that, but then that negates the thought I was sharing, and I think that Councilmember Balcom, right, was addressing regarding cost. If approving these in unison is able to help them become cost effective, then that gets negated if they're predicated on 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet.
Because Lou might, Lou might say, yeah, that's great. Let Bagheri pay the cost and then I'll connect.
It's great for Lou.
Right. So I think that there's a way to express the intent in a legal way that I can't.
We're not going to do it.
I
from
can't
here.
say that. But to me, the opposite is what I think is unfair. We are, it's a conditional approval. Bagheri can't do anything until the main is there. And once the main is there, then Lou could do this administratively. So it just doesn't make sense to deny Lou.
Well, I think what I'm more concerned about is the other 5 properties between, and if one of those that's way down closer to the main got approved conditionally, then they could work with just a few properties down on that end to build that main up to their house and then not build it all the way to Bagheri. So without the main actually existing or being in the planning and design stages, it seems like you could open up this piecemeal, the next house up the road gets its approval based on the fact that there's going to one day be a main there.
But that house couldn't connect either until the main is.
Right, but who knows how far the main is going to be built. If the individual property owners are paying for it, they'll say, well, I only want 300 feet of extension, not 1,600 feet. There's too many other big properties between us and the end of the line.
But couldn't they do that now?
Yeah, I don't understand the problem. with that.
Well, they don't qualify under abutting mains now, and they don't qualify under the Potomac Peripheral Sewer Service policy. So until that main exists, they don't qualify for a category change. We have one map that showed the
Yeah.
I think I'm just not using the right words to explain.
No, I get it.
I'm not.
Well,
I'm not following.
Well, it's a conceptual argument, right? And so I understand the point that you're raising. Let me maybe perhaps rephrase it. If the first house is approved conditionally, then what is stopping, you're arguing here, what's stopping the rest of the houses on the block from being approved conditionally? And then that main going from what was originally one house all the way up the block. Is that fair?
Yeah, so I don't want to see the ones on the lower end get approval without the line there. If they
Well,
don't otherwise qualify.
Let me ask a different question. What is the problem with that proposal?
Mhm.
The problem is just the policies in the sewer plan itself.
So
They're
the-
designed to, keep this piecemeal extension of sewer service. It would rather see something that would serve 12 properties like this. But Keith, if you could go to the next.
This one.
Yeah, go to the next one where you got some of the arrows.
Mhm.
So these people have sewer service. The next one,
They're approved.
these people are approved.
These are approved but don't have it.
If the main were extended, so they could, the two of them, pay to have the line built up that road to serve their properties. They haven't yet. So in the next one.
These are likely eligible under the same policy that Big Harry is.
All right, so I'm not concerned about them because they qualify, but these don't qualify under any policy right now. So if one of those comes in for a category change and it gets conditionally approved based on a main that doesn't exist, then the one that's the southernmost of those properties could develop and not build the sewer line all the way up. But they shouldn't be able to develop because they don't qualify under the policies until the
Mhm.
main exists. So chicken and egg, I think, is
But once the line is built to Begary, they all qualify.
right. But if the people on the southern end get together and want to build the line only up to a certain
Yeah,
point.
I get your.
So that, I mean, I was just kind of suggesting that perhaps it'd be conditioned on the line being
Mhm.
designed all the way to Begary, so that it is clear that they're only approved if that line gets built to the one that does qualify and has applied.
Yeah, I think what we're getting at is, and it's the chicken and the egg. In order to be eligible under the abutting mains, in order to connect, you have to have an abutting main to connect to. In order to be approved, as Alan said, there has to be an approved main that will go there, but the issue is, could that applicant that is not eligible unless there's an abutting main initiate that? And what we've said is Big Harry has sort of initiated this, but what happens if something short of the full extension were to be pursued? And I think we can try to do some language there. I see Alan has his hand up.
Yeah,
again.
Mr. Sukup.
Yes, thank you. This is the way that water sewer main extensions especially oftentimes get built in Montgomery County. Now, the assumption would be that all of those properties had been approved for public sewer, but the extension is built for the property owners that are closest to the existing main, and they only want to extend it to their properties, which is not unusual. And so that's as far as it goes. Maybe it just goes to these two properties that are already approved either side of Ridge Drive. There we back to the other one. There we go. Thank you. If we know that WSSC has approved the sewer alignment for going up to the Begary property, and other property owners in between want to utilize abutting mains or the peripheral service policy to also qualify, they can do that. But they have to recognize that the cost may not be within their ability unless more people join in. One of the things that we would probably want to do with the Lou property is to caution that if the Begary property does not get a main extension approved by WSSC, then the conditional abutting mains approval for Lou doesn't mean anything, and we would have to revoke it. So, there are a number of qualifications that need to be put into a conditional approval like this. And I would be, we'd be happy to sit down and work with Keith on the language that needs to be utilized to make sure everybody's covered. Again, these are expensive extensions. They may not be built for a long time or ever, frankly.
Right.
Mhm.
So thank you for that, Mr. Sukup. So it actually sounds to me, it's not necessarily the chicken or the egg, but I think there's a disconnect in what conditional approval actually means. I'm making the assumption, and based on the comments and questions of my colleagues, the conditional approval is the sewer main itself being built and or approved by WSSC and MDE. And so if there are properties further up the road that are conditionally approved, they can't short circuit it and try to take a main from a different direction and hook it up to their house. It's conditionally approved on that main that we're talking about. Does that make sense? Are we honing in on?
Yeah, I just want the condition to be careful enough that that there aren't some more people that come in that wouldn't otherwise qualify, that don't build the whole thing because it's not in their interest to do so, or whatever.
Or look at and try to hook up from another
Yeah.
way. Yeah, I got it now. Okay.
Well, can I just ask you a question on that? I fully agree with that. But given that MDE has to approve these, isn't that another
Yeah,
fail-safe in that they wouldn't approve it
yes.
if that was the case?
I think if the condition is worded correctly, they're more
Yeah.
likely to approve
Okay.
it.
Right.
Okay, all right. So,
So the language.
What we'll do, I think we have the intent of the committee.
right,
We will work on some language and make sure that committee members understand that, are comfortable with it before we schedule this for a full council review. But we'll make sure we have that intent language
Yeah.
before you.
I mean, I would again just say that the conditional approval is the safety valve,
Mhm.
right? And we should not be placing any additional undue burden
Yep.
or process.
Yeah.
The one already set forth is already burdensome as it is. Yeah. Okay, we're unanimous consent on that. Work through that, and then we'll get some language for you all before we bring that to the full council.
Yeah.
And Mr. Ovchenko, that's it for today.
Yeah, just those two items. That was it.
Okay, just those two items. Thank you, planning. Thank you, DEP. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Levchenko.
you.
And Mr. Sukup, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always good conversations. Service.